Well, let's talk more about European migration policy. Marta Foresti is a director at the Overseas Development Initiative, which is a global think tank working for peace and sustainability. Thanks for joining us in the studio. Matteo Salvini, the far-right Italian leader, now Interior Minister, on an outreach trip to Libya. He's at the forefront, along with people like Orban in Hungary, of a big anti-migration drive, tearing, really, European policy apart. Why is it that the European Union doesn't seem to be able to come up with a more sustainable, coherent, unified policy that isn't simply closing borders and keeping people out?
Thank you. It has been a problem since the so-called crisis of 2015, and we've seen the European Union as a whole, as a political platform, failing to come up with a unified response to the then crisis and today's realities of migration from Africa. I think the time has come to perhaps explore alternatives to the ideas that the only alternative to Salvini's and Orban's nationalist rhetoric is an EU-wide response with 28 member states that for the time being I don't see being able to come to a collective agreement. You mentioned Orban. Think of Theresa May's preoccupation with Brexit. It's hard to imagine how these 28 states could, at this point in time, come up with...
So what is an alternative approach?
So the alternative would be, and it's one that Angela Merkel has mentioned as she stepped out of the so-called mini-summit on Sunday. The time has come for, a number of countries, a smaller group of countries, she mentioned bilateral and trilateral deals for countries that actually share common interests, be them political or economic or indeed geographical, to agree an alternative, more pragmatic response to what are problems that clearly affect their own national interests and their own national borders. For example, for a number of years, the reality of arrivals by sea has been largely dealt by individual countries. Greece in 2015, Italy up until now. Now that Salvini is pulling the plug, so to speak, and closing the ports, we've seen Spain coming up to, stepping up to the plate. How about countries that are on the Mediterranean Sea agreeing a system to share the responsibility for arrivals rather than assuming that one country alone can deal with the problem and then run into the political conflict Italy has done?
That's a fine idea, but we've heard Matteo Salvini speak.
Yeah.
We've heard right-wing politicians in Greece. We've heard the view voiced time and again that simply this has gone on for too long. They've shouldered the burden alone for too long. It seems unrealistic to me that this small group of countries would agree to share it simply among themselves. They want everybody involved or none of it at all.
I couldn't agree more. So arrivals from, at sea is only one aspect of the phenomena. The other aspects are, of course, political and economic. Now, here you have leaders like Merkel and Macron who risk big domestic political turmoil in their own countries unless they do find ways of sharing some elements, at least, of the migration problems in Europe. We've seen how Merkel has come under attack for acting alone and not managing the other to follow suit. I think if Macron, leaves Merkel isolated, and if the two don't come up with some sort of an alliance to do something about it, both of them risk their political future.
You've got a quite dangerous sort of shifting political dynamic within the EU on this issue, because Macron, we saw him getting into trouble with the Italians when he voiced his criticism and was swiftly slapped down for turning people away at his own border. Merkel has had her problems with her coalition. The whole debate seems to be shifting to the right. Can it be brought back to a centre ground?
Precisely because it is shifting to the right, and we've heard the Austrian government calling for a similar idea of the so-called axis of the willing, of those that bring very strong anti-migration propositions on the table. So it is therefore even more important that those who are prepared, interested, and also that have risk political failure if they don't confront that. And in fact, we've seen what happened in Italy, how quickly sort of the nationalist parties have taken power. So I think it is precisely because there is that risk, and it's now happened in a number of countries, that there is a need to respond with an alternative coalition that can try to propose an alternative. And this alternative has got to be pragmatic and not idealistic. This is not a matter of open European borders to everybody and everyone. See what happened in this country, in the UK, a couple of weeks ago, where the Home Office had to lift the skilled migration cap to allow doctors and nurses to come to the UK because there is an effective shortage. So you can imagine in a number of countries the fact that there may well be specific needs that local economies have, a particular profile of migrant workers, and therefore cooperate in some some forms of visa regime system that allow at least some legal migration to take place where and if it makes sense. Importantly, the crisis is now over. Migration to Europe is manageable. The numbers have fallen. We're talking about 40,000 arrivals to Italy from July 17 to July 18.
But the death rate is ticking up.
Death rates, which actually makes it even more urgent, and I don't think that there is one single European leader that can take the risk of more deaths and humanitarian crises at sea. So the manageable numbers of arrivals, the urgent need to save people's lives, and the fact that migration is a reality that is not going to go away, in my mind, should be sufficient for at least some leaders, some countries to step up to these new deals that Angela Merkel and others have been calling for.
Let's hope so, and let's wait and see. Marta Foresti, many thanks for your time.